And now, the most reasonable talk show host from Sop Choppy to the Redneck Riviera, here is Bob Kerrigan.
I want to talk for a moment tonight about 2 or 3 stories. And the first one reveals basically this situation in the United States. It's like the movie Home Alone. The government has left, but they've left behind a 7-year-old. Really, we would be better off if that 7-year-old was making decisions than the people in the government now. Listen to this story. A lengthy investigation published Thursday at the New York Times reveals that the Pentagon gave an inexperienced 22-year-old a $300 million contract to provide ammunition to Afghanistan, you know, where we're there fighting for freedom. The shady deal resulted in decades-old substandard munitions being delivered to U.S. and Afghan troops fighting on the front lines of the war on terror. Following publication of this article, the House Oversight Committee announced it would investigate AEY Inc., a fledgling company that thrived after 2003 as the U.S. government began handing out billions of dollars of contracts. Chairman Henry Waxman invited company officials. Well, let's talk about the officials of the company for just a moment. The company's president is a 22-year-old named Ephraim E. Diveroli, who ran the company with a 25-year-old. There is Mr. Diveroli. Now, if you would trust him to go pick up a pizza and bring it back for you by giving him $20, I'll be astounded. Now, here's the guy. This is the president of the company. Now, this guy gets $300 million. Well, what's wrong with the ammunition? Well, the story goes on to explain the company and the Army would not divulge where the ammunition AEY provided came from, but the Times reports that interviews and records from several sources show the company shopped from stocks in the old Eastern Bloc, including Albania, Bulgaria, and the Czech Republic, and Hungary, etc., Romania, Slovakia. And in an audio recording, Diveroli is speaking to Costa Trebeka, an Albanian businessman, about Yili Perani, director of an Albanian agency in charge of arms exports. Diveroli says in this tape he can't play monkey business with the mafia and all those effing guys in Albania because his contract is with the U.S. government and, quote, everyone is watching me. Isn't that encouraging? Everybody is watching Mr. Diveroli. The problem was that the ammunition he was selling to our troops and to the Afghan allies was defective crap and junk. Now, does anybody in their right mind believe that somebody at the Pentagon is not involved in a corrupt contract? I mean, how could this possibly happen? We have allowed in this country this phony patriotism to completely mask our objectivity about the incompetence that is pervasive in the Pentagon and the massive waste of money. Now, here's a story that is disturbing, to say the least, and it's a story that I covered initially based on one young woman's experience. But this is from Jane Harman, a congresswoman from California. This was in the LA Times. The stories are shocking in their simplicity and brutality. A female military recruit is pinned down at knife point and raped repeatedly in her own barracks. Her attackers hid their faces, but she identified them by their uniforms. They were her fellow soldiers. During a routine gynecological examination, a female soldier is attacked and raped by her military physician. Yet another soldier, still adapting to life in a war zone, is raped by her commanding officer. Afraid for her standing and her unit, she feels she has nowhere to turn. These are true stories, and sadly not isolated incidents. Women serving in the United States military are more likely to be raped by a fellow soldier than killed by enemy fire in Iraq. The scope of the problem was brought into acute focus for me during a visit to the West Los Angeles VA Healthcare Center, Congressman Harmon writes, where I met with female veterans and their doctors. My jaw dropped when the doctors told me that 41% of female veterans seen at the clinic say they were victims of sexual assault while in the military. 29% reported being raped during their military service. They spoke of their continued terror, feelings of helplessness, and the downward spirals many of their lives have since taken. According to DoD statistics, only 181 out of 2,212 subjects investigated for sexual assault in 2007, including 1,259 reports of rape, were referred to court-martial, the equivalent of criminal prosecution in the military. Another 218 were handled via non-punitive administrative action or discharge. 201 subjects were disciplined through non-judicial punishment, which means they may have been confined to quarters. This in stark contrast to the civilian trend of prosecuting sexual assault. In California, for example, 44% of reported rapes result in arrests. 64% of those who are arrested are prosecuted, according to the California Department of Justice. The Department of Defense must close this gap, she says. I have raised the issue with the Defense Secretary Robert Gates. Congress is not doing much better. Although these sexual assault statistics are readily available, our oversight has failed to come to grips with the magnitude of this crisis. And we go back to the incompetence, if not indifference, of the Pentagon. So let's just suspend all the flag waving and the Republican flag on your lapel and hand over your heart for the Star-Spangled Banner and all this other so-called patriotic. It is nonsense. It has nothing to do with being a patriot. A patriot is somebody who demands that the government act responsibly, take care of our troops who are in harm's way, and don't just endlessly waste money with pie-in-the-sky BS weapon systems that can't work, won't work, and should never have been commenced in the first place. And we have countless examples of that. This is not new. This is not unparalleled or unchallenged, or can be challenged, rather. Sad note here about the state of the economy. Driven by a painful mix of layoffs and rising food and fuel prices, the number of Americans receiving food stamps is projected to reach what? What do you think? How many people in this country receiving $100 a month benefit for food that is controlled, the kinds of food that they can buy? How many people do you think have to go and surrender their dignity and their pride and wait and apply and go through the insufferable kinds of treatment that many of them have to go through to get $100 worth of food a month? How many do you think in this country? 3 million, 5 million, 10 million? What do you think? Well, the answer is 28 million in the coming year. You can't blame all of this, on any given administration. Sometimes things happen, the economy waxes and wanes. What we can say is that this president and this administration have spent so carelessly, so recklessly, and financed the war almost exclusively on debt that it will be hard to get out of this, to really get out of this. And there is no question the generations to follow us are going to be carrying enormous debt. Ronald Reagan was dead duck wrong. The deficits don't matter. They matter. Join us again next week for Within Reason. Bob Kerrigan with you. Email me, fax me, or send me a voicemail message. We'll see you next Wednesday night at 7.